Good morning to the audience. Again, thank you for attending. We'll make this as interesting as we can and useful. I'm basically going to go through a presentation to give some ideas about how to take where you are now, wherever that is and as a group, and improve performance, get a better result. And so because everybody has a different life cycle in mind or how they use their current practices, I'm going to start with just a Scrum Agile perspective as a starting point, and then discuss how we would then take that and build a recipe or modify that to get a better result. But just a starting point, so whenever you see the word Scrum and Agile, you can certainly replace that with your existing life cycle, whatever that would be. So we'll start off there, then we'll discuss identifying goals and problems, and that is if you want to kind of decode and determine what to improve and kind of where to improve it, there's a simple set of questions you can go through to get a picture of where you would like to add or modify practices to the way you do work now. Then we'll discuss kind of where to add stuff. If you come up with new practices to add, kind of new recipe steps, then where would you put those in your flow? And then I'm going to go through some examples, very common examples in all organizations, but particularly maybe in the Agile Scrum space for a lot of teams. The requirements issue, adding, going beyond one-liner requirements, where to add architecture and design activities, looking at final system test validation, adding CM, version control, risk management, process assurance, and then the issues of scaling for larger teams. Again, this would apply to Agile and non-Agile teams. And then taking all these activities and making your own lifecycle recipe. So I use the word recipe just as an analogy because if you're going to buy or cook food, it's pretty obvious you want a result at the end. And you care about the result at the end almost above and beyond the steps you kind of went through to get there. But if you can kind of determine the steps that are good, then you have a consistent way to get a result at the end. So it's just an analogy to think about taking the current organization and then modifying and adapting things to consistently get a result towards the end of the project. First, I'm going to start off with an example of Agile Scrum. I'll just define that so we have a common view. So Agile is one of the, Scrum is one of the Agile methodologies, the most popular nowadays. There were other ones at the very beginning, Crystal, adaptive software development, etc., extreme programming. But the one that came to the forefront and has become most popular under Agile is Scrum. And Scrum is really a set of predefined milestones that help scope in a project, estimate, plan, and status. It's really a simplified and useful project management methodology. If you look at the premise of Scrum and Agile, it goes back to this manifesto. And a lot of the upside and positives of Scrum come from this, and a lot of the risks and downsides come from this too. And I'll discuss kind of what those downsides could be, or at least risks, and how then to modify those or add things to your recipe to get a better result. So they start off with these items in the manifesto, which are really value statements. For example, individuals and interactions are valued more than or over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to a change over following a plan. And the upside of this is if you were experiencing a negative implementation of processes and tools and documentation and contracts and planning, then to flip that and get a positive, you would enjoy the things in green on the left because they are more focused on a result of a software system and a team kind of working together. However, if you focus too much on the left and ignore the right altogether, because teams may value the left more than the right, then there are negative consequences of doing that too. And that's where the results of Agile become less than good because people get into a kind of a busy state of doing work every 2 weeks and they may actually lose a complete view of the long-term part of the project. So I think the issue here is that recognizing where you started off and what kind of caused some of the problems you're having, and then recognizing a balance. So my little picture here on slide 11, really you want to look at the results of the group and the problems they're having, or challenges, and then strike a balance between these two things. It's neither using the left kind of recipe or the right recipe, like a diet plan. It's a balance between the two, and that's where the better results come from. So we don't want to lose anything we have in the current life cycle we're using, like Agile Scrum, but we do want to understand objectively the problems we're having or challenges and then address those. I picked Scrum as a baseline methodology, but you could replace this diagram with your current kind of life cycle. I'll go through very quickly with the kind of terms here. We have a backlog, which is the list of uncommitted work, typically a requirements work or feature set, that is just kind of out there that the team can consider to work on, but it's a backlog and it hasn't been completely kind of decided upon yet. And then as they do release planning, they may have a release in mind, like 6-month release or a 9-month release, and they determine from the backlog which of the features and functions they're going to work on and which is kind of left on the backlog uncommitted to. And then if you pick a sprint, which is an iteration or a 2-week increment, it could be 2, 3, or 4 weeks, so they say 2 for simplicity. Then we sprint plan. We define the activities for that particular 2-week period. And then we go through a sprint review or demonstration at the end of the 2 weeks, which is a way to objectively see that the system or that part that has been finished correctly and actually functions, and then retrospective or lessons learned to figure out how well we did work and where the challenges were to fold those into the next cycle. So if the sprint planning is on a Monday and it's a 2-week sprint, then the last retrospective was on a Friday. After 2 weeks and the following Monday, or the end of that Friday, they start to look at the backlog again, see how it changed, the priorities changed, new items were added, sprint planning again to revise the next 2 weeks, and then go through the cycle. And the word potentially deliver means that the software or the IT solution that has been built in that 2 weeks should be good enough to function correctly when delivered, but may be too small in nature to actually make any sense to deliver. So the definition of kind of done is that it could be delivered if everything else is ready, but we may have to wait other iterations before other components are finished and then deliver the whole thing. So it's basically a very cyclic set of steps you go through every 2 weeks or the sprint duration to take work off the backlog, commit to it, and then build and demonstrate that. Now, upsides or positives of Scrum that are certainly worth remembering, because I recommend you do Scrum if you want doing it, but there's a lot of downsides unless you're very cautious. So you have some cake-making skills, but you don't have all the cake-making skills you're going to need. So work is chunked, which is good. Scope changes are managed, because if the scope changes or requirements changes, they're added to the backlog, and then the team picks up on those changes and reviews them prior to the next sprint. The iterations themselves cause momentum, so the team can focus on the work in hand, and they have a standard set of practices they go through in those other yellow boxes as they kind of do that work over 2 weeks. The process itself can be learned and used in less than 2 days. It's very quick and easy to pick up and start to kind of get use out of. And then the daily stand-ups and the burn-down charts are going to give you a status. What work is complete, what issues are we having, and to get that those issues escalated and then resolved. And then when within the bigger agile kind of umbrella, there are some typical engineering practices that are picked up.